Welcome back on this first Monday of the new year. Well, there's an unfortunate trend. It's called National Divorce Day, unfortunately. Numbers go up as we kind of move on into the new year, especially into January. So we're talking about a new fresh start. And if you're already in this type of a situation, we're trying to help you kind of move through it. This morning, divorce attorney Jacqueline Newman joins us with the divorce trends that we will see this year and ways to manage those as well. Dr. Jacqueline, good morning to you. Happy New Year, and thank you for your time today.
Happy New Year, and thanks so much for having me.
So unfortunately, of course, a lot of families may find themselves in this type of a situation on this day or moving on into January. Kind of give us a starting point. Where do you even begin to kind of move through this type of a situation?
So, I mean, divorce is hard. There's no question about that. And what happens a lot in January, and especially being that we're in the COVID world is a whole nother level. But generally, what happens in January is a lot of people that, obviously you don't want to start a divorce action during the holidays. Nobody wants a summons in their stocking. And so, beginning of January is where a lot of people say, you know what, I don't want to end the year the way I started it. And so we get a lot of people that come into our office to have initial consultations to kind of learn more about the divorce process, what it's going to look like. And then from there, usually people kind of fade, and consider it in February. And then I find coming toward the spring is when it really, really starts to jump in divorce rate.
Is it because the process is very intense and obviously people then leave your office and they really have to weigh whether or not they want to go through that process?
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people a lot, like, you don't get divorced unless you're absolutely, absolutely sure. It's a very, very hard process to go through. It's emotionally exhausting, it's financially exhausting, and hard to turn back from. So I tell people, make sure you're making an educated decision. Usually during this process, people do start thinking about, am I really ready to get divorced? It's a big decision, obviously, and it impacts your family and your finances. And so you need to make sure you're ready. And so I do find that during that time, people come in and, they may realize they're not ready to get divorced. And, I'm a big advocate of then you go to couples counseling and you try to work it out.
Love to hear that. And I think you're right. When the pandemic first began, there was no telling how long if there's an individual working from home and their children are learning from home. And that is a lot to balance when all of you are inside one building for an extended amount of time.
Absolutely. And I work primarily in New York City. So we're talking about New York City apartments. And I say, no matter how big your apartment is, it's never big enough for homeschooling and having people working from home. So there's a lot of stress. There was uncertainty in the market. People are fighting a lot because, when you had, I say when marriages were on the edge, this has really pushed a lot of them over, even though I do think that the big, big divorce jumps are going to happen when life normalizes. I think right now is not a great time to get divorced, not knowing what the world's going to look like soon.
So not a great time to get divorced. Then what do you recommend for people right now once they come to see you? We have some 2021 divorce trends up on the screen right now. Can you talk about some of those rates and what else you can recommend here this year?
So I really recommend that people, again, become very, very, very educated. I think what's happened, when this began, I got a lot of phone calls from people saying, just get me out of here. And, I think that what happened during COVID and the way people are behaving during COVID does not necessarily dictate the way that people are going to behave afterwards. So, I think that this is a big time to kind of like look at your relationship, take an opportunity possibly to strengthen your relationship if you can. If not, then I think it's a time to become educated, learn what divorce really looks like, and be ready for it. Learn about your finances, start thinking about custody arrangements that you'd be comfortable with, and really become educated because people throw divorce around a lot, but it's not a word to be taken lightly.
So I have about 30 seconds with you. Let's talk specifically. One of the thing on the trends was 50-50 parenting. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that will happen with families? Is that a new phenomenon this year?
So I think a lot of people have been moving toward a 50-50. That said, I think there's going to be a big argument toward 50-50 going forward because one of the big claims that used to happen in courts is when you had one parent who was the primary caretaker and really kind of knew exactly their child's likes and dislikes and was part of the daily routines, and the other parent wasn't. Now both parents are home. And so now, I say both parents are seeing how, one child only colors with purple crayons and the other one wants their sandwiches just so. Now that everyone's learning these daily routines, I think it's going to be a big push to people being more 50-50 and wanting to spend equal time with their children once they get divorced.
More motions seeking relocation. What does that mean?
So what that means is that, if people, let's say everybody was living in New York City, and now, due to the pandemic, a lot of people left the city and they went to the suburbs, they went to, secondary houses, whatever it is. And, I think the theory is that once, everything normalizes, everybody's going to come back to New York City or whatever city or wherever they were ultimately living. And I think what's going to happen is people have adjusted. As you said in the beginning, we thought this was going to be a couple of weeks. This is now turning into possibly a year, and children are adjusting to their new schools, they're adjusting to their friends, and they're developing lives outside of where they lived before. And I think a lot of people are going to be asking the courts to say, don't make me come back, let me stay where I am.
And more disputes over parenting decisions. As you mentioned, parents are starting to get more involved there in the kids' lives, and so they're going to have more to say. Is that really what it comes down to?
I think it comes down to that. I think also, we're having a lot of, issues about COVID protocols. One parent believes masks, one parent doesn't. One parent believes a child should be in school, one parent says they should not be. I think when the vaccine comes out for children, it's going to be a big source of discussion. You're going to have some parents that are going to want it, some that aren't. So I think there's going to be a lot of fights that really just didn't exist before due to the COVID situation.
Well, Dr. Newman, I'm so glad that to hear you say that, hey, you tried to share with people just to wait it out and see if they can work it out at least for a few months, and to make absolutely sure this is something they need. We appreciate your time this morning. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Thanks again.